When news of COVID-19 hit Fiji, the most worrying thing for me was the thought of one of my family members or my friends getting it, and then the ability of any of the hospitals or health system in Fiji being able to give them the care that they needed to recover. Because I was watching a lot of the news and how bigger hospitals and bigger economies and health systems were struggling to cope with COVID-19. So I was just thinking in my head, how on earth is Fiji going to cope? But now in hindsight, I'm so grateful that that was controlled in the way that it was, because it meant that, while people were affected by it, the infection or the spreading of it was quite well taken care of in Fiji. At the time I lived in Fleet, Hampshire, so it's one of the counties in the southern part of England. It's a small town, and the majority of the people in the town were over 70s or pensioners. So it was a very worrying time for us in the area, and it meant that a lot of our neighbors, our church community were very vulnerable, and we've lost a couple of them, unfortunately, during the lockdown. And then when the restrictions were put in place where they couldn't even leave their homes, it meant that for a good 3 or 4 months, they could not see their friends and family, and their friends and family could not come and see them. So that was quite difficult to observe from the outside. And the community sort of banded together to do what we could to sort of help out. My restriction was limited to that we could only leave the house for an hour a day for vital things like getting an hour of exercise or going to do shopping or getting your medicines, and you couldn't travel more than 5 miles away from your home. I was diagnosed with a medical condition that required a surgery, a minor operation. But when lockdown happened, all those things that weren't considered emergency were sort of pushed back. So I have not been able to access that surgery to date. And also, when that happened to me in March, I got a case of very severe abdominal pain, so I was rushed to the hospital just before lockdown happened. I went into the A&E department while my husband could not come in with me because of the safety precautions people, and I understood that and the need to do that, and I respected that. But it was difficult. So that was not even a serious case for me. So I can only imagine people with more severe conditions, or moms going in to give birth, or people who have to be in hospital for even longer and not being able to have the support of your friends and family during that difficult time. So that was one of the other impacts of COVID-19 for me. In hindsight, my mental health was not in a good state. For the first 3 or 4 weeks of lockdown, I just slept a lot, and I had such an unhealthy life. There was no routine. I was eating everything unhealthy under the sun. I was quite depressed. Now that, when I look back at it, I wish I had paid more attention to how I was feeling and recognizing that it's not normal times that we're in, and it's important to find ways to pick yourself up and, continue as well. A great one thing I would use to sort of cope, a main one would be tuning in and paying more attention to how I'm feeling at the time, and finding a good routine, as well as staying connected to positive spaces. For those of us who have moved abroad, there is a certain degree of isolation because of the absence of our normal support systems of friends and family. So when lockdown happens, it sort of deepens that isolation a bit more. So I found in little communities in the UK, groups of volunteers would set up to sort of help the more vulnerable members of the community, so the over 70s, people with who were limited in terms of movement physically. So these groups of volunteers would set up around the community to help them with their shopping, help them with stuff that they need. So I think connecting to communities like that is quite helpful in a very isolating period for a lot of us.